I think one thing that needs to happen, to be honest with you, is there needs to be a salary cap put in place for incoming freshmen.
Love it.
To get it back to what it used to be. I'm picking Kansas State, or I'm picking KU, or I'm picking Mizzou because of the fit in the scheme, the coaches, all that, not based on, well, I just got this amount of money from, I'm going to the highest bidder.
Right.
And I also, if they could also say, hey, we're going to put a cap on, you're going to stay at a school you sign with for at least 2 years before you can enter the transfer portal. I think those two things would help everybody, across the country.
Thanks for listening to KC Sports Network, proudly presented by Emprise Bank. If you're thinking about starting a business or know someone who is, check out Emprise Bank's SBA loans. It's always good to know your options, and they can be your partner in possible.
Hello, and welcome back to a special National Signing Day edition of the Verbal Commitment Podcast on the Kansas City Sports Network, brought to you by Homefield Apparel. I'm Kevin Flaherty, and I'm here, as always, with my good friend Ryan Wallace, and we're talking about the world of local recruiting from Kansas and Kansas City prospects to the college classes at Kansas, Kansas State, and Missouri. We have two great guests lined up for you today, with Clint Brown, Kansas State's Director of Roster Management, joining us to help break down the Wildcats class, and former Rockhurst High School star and Kansas defensive backs coach Brandon Shelby will be here to talk about the Jayhawks. As always, if you like what you're hearing, tell your friends about us, subscribe, hit that like button, leave us a 5-star review wherever you get your podcasts, like Apple or Spotify, or just comment right below if you're watching YouTube. Let us know what we're doing right, what we're doing wrong, what we could be doing better. All those things help us to grow the show and get us in front of more people like you. Ryan, before we jump in to signing day, I understand you have some news for us.
Yeah, I think we'll give myself a siren for this here. I won't go full siren treatment with the red light, but we'll okay, that's all I get for my siren. But yeah, I mean, for those that are unaware, this was my last week as we record this episode, my final day as the recruiting editor at GoPowerCat.com. Been there for 17 years in terms of video editing, and then later kind of taking on the recruiting role that I've held for well over a decade now. So it was time for me to, move on, hand the reins off to Cole Carmody. Gives me some more uninterrupted time, away from my phone with my family here, Kevin. Allows me more time to continue this show and this brand, because it's not going anywhere. Folks, I was naive, Kevin, in writing a mini novel on Twitter, hoping that people might reach the end where there was the part that, hey, I'm not leaving the recruiting world. We're going to still do local recruiting over at KCSN and Verbal Commitment. But I don't think folks read that far, and I don't blame you. So if you didn't get that far, I still have my full-time job elsewhere at Garmin, but recruiting is still going to be a major part of you and I's lives here on Verbal Commitment. So good news is, I think Go Power Cats in great hands with Cole and Fitz and that team. Also good news, Verbal Commitment is staying strong.
We are excited about the future of this show and continuing to give attention to not just the elite recruits in the area, but also continuing to shine that spotlight on some of the under-the-radar guys. And we have plans to potentially ramp that part up another notch in the future. But that's a discussion for another day, Ryan, because as we mentioned, it is National Signing Day. And before, you'd spend the first Wednesday in February waiting for faxes to roll in. Most of the FBS and Power 4 staffs now, they've already done their jobs. The hay's in the barn. And that makes later signing day a busier day for junior colleges and Division II type schools. But for Kansas, Kansas State, and Missouri, who we talk about quite a bit on this show, the letters have been signed not just by the high school players, but for most of their transfer classes as well.
Yeah, and I miss the old days, Kevin. I miss the days of getting up at 5 a.m., going and grabbing, a big batch of donuts, and hunkering down for the day, right? You might eat dinner at 10 p.m., but it was well worth it with all the fireworks and the phone calls and the flurry of, is he going to sign? Did his paperwork get in? I do miss it, but at the same time, it is nice to kind of have a day for the power schools to just tie a bow on everything now that the transfer market is finally kind of died down.
Well, let's start off with Missouri, which has signed the number 16 overall class, according to the team industry average, which combines 24/7 sports, Rivals.com, and On3. There's a lot to love about that high school class, and Donovan Alugbade is a guy I want to talk about real quick, Ryan, because he could plug and play immediately into a receiving core that's losing Luther Burden and Theo Wheat.
Yeah, and the nice thing for Missouri is Alugbade and Sean Terry, one of their other standout wide receiver signees, are already on campus as early enrollees. Alugbade is coming off, I believe he was the leading receiver statistically in the Under Armour All-America game. So he had a great showing there. But the other thing I like about both of those guys, Kevin, not only the fact that they're enrolled early, but I think that there's going to be expectations for those guys, especially Alugbade, but not the pressure to be wide receiver one right away, maybe like Luther Burden had, because you have Kevin Coleman coming in from Mississippi State, and you still have returners like Josh Manning and Marquise Johnson. So I think it's just a great opportunity for Alugbade and those guys to get their feet wet this year, and don't get it twisted. I mean, they still have an opportunity to make a big dent in this Tigers offense next year. Those were really good gets.
Of course, the way you win in the SEC, as we know, is in the trenches. And Missouri fared really well there. On the graphic, you saw Javion Hilson and Dayton Hopkins you can add in that group. Also did really well, Ryan, with the offensive line class, headlined by Jack Lang. Hopkins and Lang, by the way, in-state recruits, but nice job filling up on both sides of the ball there.
Yeah, for the offensive line, I mean, Missouri had most of their interior returning, so it was more about solidifying the tackles. Lang is a guy we've talked about on this show before. We really love him. Bad news, I guess, for him, if you want to call it bad, is that he won't arrive until the summer. He was not an early enrollee. So, I think they're going to have to see in terms of this spring how much headway the transfers can make with Keegan Trost from Wake Forest. This will be his fourth school. So he's a well-traveled guy, but also a seasoned vet. And Johnny Williams from West Virginia, man, I think he has the opportunity to really shine not only this year, but in years to come as a guy with multiple years of eligibility. And then the defensive line haul, Kevin, is just tremendous. I mean, Hilson is so gosh darn explosive off the line. His first step is unbelievable. And him being able to learn under a guy like Damon Wilson is going to be perfect for him moving forward. Big, bright future for both of those guys in Columbia.
And somehow, even with all that, perhaps the biggest news was the way Missouri addressed both the immediate and long-term aftermath of the Brady Cook era at quarterback. Penn State transfer Bo Perbula, talented dual-threat option who has a real great chance, obviously, to start next year. While Matt Zollers, who we had on our very first show here on Verbal Commitment, looks like a potential star down the line, present and future.
Both those quarterbacks, again, already on campus in Columbia, so they'll get things going. We've talked about things with Zollers that they don't need to rush him along now that they've got Perbula. With me, I'm interested to see how Kirby Moore develops Perbula as a passer. We saw him in kind of spot duty there at the end of games for Penn State, and we know he can run, but how does he mature as a passer? And also, if he doesn't mature as a passer, can Sam Horn challenge at all? Interesting storylines in Columbia moving forward.
Moving on to K-State, the Wildcats have the number 46 overall class, according to the team industry average, and one that includes the first 24/7 Sports 5-star high schooler, making sure I get all that right, to sign with Kansas State and Goodland tight end Lincoln Cure. Ryan, we're obviously both very familiar with Lincoln. He's been on the show as well. So instead of asking you to break him down, I'll ask it this way. Can Lincoln be a guy that finds his way onto the field early in Manhattan? Because he is a guy that, needs to continue to fill out all of those different things. But at the same time, might be a guy that's too talented to keep off the field in some respect, finding a role for him.
Well, and that's what I was going to say is I think, we both know that he's matured physically, and I thought his blocking and his physicality and that tenacity has come a long way. That being said, in terms of getting him ready for the Big 12 level, is he ready to start right away? Is he ready to take snaps away from Garrett Oakley, from Braden Lofton, even a guy like Will Ancio? Maybe not yet, but I thought the point you made is very accurate in that athletically, what he brings as a pass catcher is too good to keep off the field. So I still think they're going to find a way to carve out a situational role. I think early on in his career, Kevin, it might be more as a kind of jumbo receiver. And as he matures, as he transitions to the Big 12 game and gets more comfortable, then I think maybe you'll see him slide more into what you would call the traditional tight end capacity.
Lincoln and offensive lineman Brock Heath of Blue Valley Northwest are the top two offensive players to pick K-State, both in-state guys. But I actually wanted to ask you about the Wildcats loading up on defense. In Noah King, Weston Polk, Logan Bartley, JoJo Scott, Sirius Standard, and Darian Whitaker Jr.
Yes.
Excuse me. 6 of the Wildcats' top 8 commitments in the 24/7 Sports rankings are defensive players. What kind of foundation can those guys kind of lay over the next several years? Because K-State brings back a lot defensively. And then, when those guys start to kind of head out the door, you're going to start to see some of these guys break in and kind of be maybe that next generation of defensive talent for the Wildcats.
Well, my final piece of content at Go Power Cat on Wednesday was my annual report card. And I thought one of the common themes throughout this entire class for K-State was that this is a group of guys that I think is more ready now than we've seen maybe from K-State in the past. And a lot of that comes with the guys you were talking about. 4, I think, of the top 7 are defensive backs. And I love the safeties. I think they all fit a different role in the defensive backfield. But I thought cornerback in particular was an area that they like some of the young corners that they were returning. But at the same time, I think they knew that was a position that needed a little bit more competition, needed more bodies. To get a guy, JoJo Scott is a guy that we've kind of overlooked, I feel like, at K-State within this recruiting class. His length, his speed stands out. Sirius Denard, to flip him from West Virginia after the Neil Brown decision was huge. He is a speed demon. And Martell Jackson is a guy, and RJ Collins are guys that are out of kind of that top group that you and I are still really, really high on. So I think they really, truly laid the groundwork for years to come. Cornerback, hopefully, is a spot that Van Malone doesn't really need to address a whole lot moving forward if a lot of these guys pan out, and I think they do.
In the portal, the Wildcats seem to tap into a lot of guys coming from other Power 4 programs. Kansas State has transfers hailing from Ohio State twice, Alabama, USC, Oklahoma, Nebraska, Arizona, Purdue, and Boston College. Is there anybody in that transfer group that you're particularly excited about?
Yeah, well, I mean, I've talked about Gunnar Maldonado before here. I think he was probably my favorite get in terms of just no worries, zero concerns, immediate impact guy, dependable. He'll be a team captain on that defense, kind of quarterbacking things at safety. But if I got to go with a guy that maybe is kind of off the beaten path a little bit, so to speak, from a rating standpoint, Jerand Bradley gets a lot of the hype as a guy who's proven himself already at the Big 12 level. But Jerron Tibbs coming over from Purdue is a guy that has multiple years of eligibility left and can do a little bit of everything. Now, I was talking to former Purdue staffer that said he knew every single role in West Lafayette in terms of receivers. You can put him anywhere across the line of scrimmage, out wide, flanked in. He gets it done. He's got the length. He's got the size, can run every route. I'm really excited about his future with Avery Johnson.
With Kansas, the Jayhawks come in at number 58 overall in the team industry average, with most of the headlines coming from a transfer portal group ranked 24th nationally, according to 24/7 Sports. We'll get to the transfers in a minute, but first I wanted to talk about Kansas's success recruiting defensive end. Another year, another 4-star edge, according to 24/7 Sports, this time coming from Michigan City, Indiana, and Adrian Hawley. And Ryan, I know you're really high on Arizona defensive end Garrett Martin as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think Garrett Martin can follow and shadow a guy like Dean Miller moving forward. And I think Garrett Martin might be closer to carving out a role than people think. Izzy is twitched up and lengthy and all those things as Hawley is, no, but I think he's got a more balanced game. And I think what he can do against the run and how strong he is kind of as an anchor. I watched a highlight recently of him taking on kind of a goal line stand and holding up. I think that's going to really impress the Kansas staff. If Garrett Martin can't get on the field right away, Kevin, it doesn't matter because I think there's still a lot going to be left in his tank. He's going to be a multi-year contributor in Lawrence.
We've talked on the show quite a bit about Kansas's momentum in state in the 2026 class. And Ryan, I can't help but feel like some of that momentum maybe started in 2025 with the Jayhawks taking 3 in-staters and Mays wideout Bryson Hayes. One of my favorite evals, of course, in Axtell's Brandon Schmelsley and Blue Valley West athlete Tate Nagy. Look, let's lay cards on the table, Ryan. We've seen classes where Kansas didn't really go all in on the obvious in-state guys. So in a lot of ways, it was almost a little refreshing to see them step out on a limb is the wrong way to put it. But didn't it seem like maybe they trusted their own evals on some under-the-radar local guys to a greater extent than what we've seen?
100%. I mean, these were the type of guys that I think in years past, under former regimes at KU, you and I would be saying, like, why aren't they giving this kid a chance? Because trait-wise or tools-wise, everything seems to check out, and yet you'd kind of find them going out of state. And I think with all 3 of the guys that you mentioned there, Kevin, I think they all bring a little bit different skill set to the position. And yet I think it still allows a lot to work with and a lot to be groomed under this KU coaching staff. So a lot to like about those guys. And again, they found players that I think fit, former KU players that you can show them the path that they can follow. I think about a guy like Bryson Hayes and what Luke Grimm did. And it'll be interesting to see kind of how those guys develop. And among those 3, since they are kind of even, so to speak, in a lot of ways, who ends up kind of taking the first leap?
Kansas had a lot of needs in the transfer portal with 30 departing seniors, and they went shopping in the portal, especially a wide receiver, offensive line at linebacker. And it's the latter position where the Jayhawks arguably did the most damage. 24/7 Sports ranks South Carolina linebacker Bengali Kamara is a 4-star get and Kansas's best linebacker acquisition, while West Virginia backer Trey Lathan and All-MAC linebacker Joseph Sipp from Bowling Green could also start at open spots at the second level.
Yeah, I mean, stop me if you've heard this before in Lawrence, but a Bowling Green linebacker that looks like he could get on the field right away. I mean, first team All-MAC guy in Sipp. And then you've got Lathan coming over with 79 tackles. Kamara, though, is a guy that I hadn't watched a whole lot of tape on until recently. And watching him at Pittsburgh, 1,300 career snaps there, he's a chess piece, Kevin. I mean, he's probably not Craig Young from the way Craig Young could cover, could get out on a Ben Sinnott and cover him. But, in the same way that Craig Young was, I think Kamara is the type of chess piece where as an opponent, you're going to have to know where he's aligned at all times because he's going to be able to do a lot of different things for the KU defense.
We have interviews coming up with Kansas State Director of Roster Management Clint Brown. But first, we want to tell you about our friends over at Home Field Apparel. Whatever kind of gear you're looking for to support your favorite school, Home Field has you covered. T-shirts, sweats, coats, quarter zips, and everything in between. Kansas, Kansas State, and Missouri fans all have more than 40 items to choose from. So head on over to homefieldapparel.com and use the promo code link below in the description, and you can get 15% off your first order. We'll be right back.
Looking for tickets for your next event? Tickets for Less is your #1 source. Save big on every purchase when you use promo code KCSN at ticketsforless.com.
Welcome back to the Verbal Commitment Podcast, sponsored by Home Field Apparel. We're joined on this National Signing Day edition by Kansas State Director of Roster Management, Clint Brown. Clint, thanks for stopping by.
You bet. Thanks for having me.
First off, we are a local recruiting show, and you guys signed a heck of a local class. When you look at Lincoln Cure, Brock Heath, Martell Jackson, McGuire Richmond, Ashton Moore, then going into Kansas City for RJ Collins and Larry Porter, Dylan Duff and Will Kemna come from Missouri. You dip up into Nebraska for a couple guys. All of that is to say, before I run out of breath, how important was it for you guys to sort of protect your home field and your backyard?
Yeah, very. Our big emphasis is going to be the 500-mile radius. Obviously, protect the border of Kansas, which dealing with Lincoln and some of those guys, it's difficult. But the 500-mile radius for us, obviously includes Nebraska and South Dakota and Minnesota, Iowa, Missouri, Oklahoma, dip into Arkansas and Northern Texas. That's the spots we're going to really focus our efforts on the most.
With it being signing day, I want to stick kind of with that 2025 cycle. In terms of high school guys and transfers, if there's a player from that market that you want to talk about, but Kevin and I are always curious: is there a guy or two that you collectively as a staff kind of come out of that cycle pumped about in terms of like, man, we feel like we nailed this scouting eval, and now we got him, we have him signed. We just feel like it's a terrific fit all around. Just somebody maybe from start to finish that you guys are just really excited about and feel like is going to be a great fit at K-State.
Well, I hope they all are. We've got a lot of guys here, right now. We haven't really started our conditioning stuff yet, but just seeing the guys in the weight room, obviously the freshmen that are here, and then obviously the transfers that are obviously here as well. Like, I've been impressed with what I've seen from George Fitzpatrick in the weight room from the standpoint of just mobility and things like that, and feel bad for the kid. All our guys got a couple weeks off, and he rolled in from practice, and he's right back in the weight room without any time off. Like Larry Porter's here early. Another guy, just an impressive looking body. All these young guys right now, especially the younger transfers, guy like, George and Gabe, they're probably a little more used to what the rigors are of power ball, and some of the other guys, especially the freshmen, are figuring that out right now. But yeah, I feel like, obviously, it's hard to project a freshman. It really is. And we're hoping that we know we're going to have a couple of them show up and play, and some of them may be surprises, and some of them may be on special teams, which is great. But I think our safety class, like Sirius,
love him.
That was a guy that we were on for a while. He was one of our top guys. And then, at the last minute, it was like, we can get back in this if we want. We want to get back in this right now. And so that was a big one, a guy we're really excited about too. And that's not taken away from anybody else, but he was one of the guys that had been on the board for a long time, been recruited heavy, lost him, and then all of a sudden back into it and have a chance. So that one for sure. But I would say the other guys as well. I mean, they're the guys that are here figuring it out, but we're excited about those guys. And even the portal class, I feel like I think easy one to target's Gunner Maldonado, because of his leadership. And we know he's coming off of an injury, but just the way he operates, you can tell he's an older, mature player that's been a captain. He's never he's never not where he's supposed to be. He's always where he's supposed to be, on time, ready to go. And so we're excited about all of them, but some of those guys really stand out just because of who they are when we recruited them.
A guy that we loved the eval on was Darian Whitaker Jr. What do you see from him, and what was it that drew you to him through the process, and how'd you say this is a guy?
Really, we liked him, and then when he came to camp, he did some things at camp, and it was like, whoa, like especially when we did some one-on-one pass rush stuff of like, hey, this guy could be, maybe he can be a 3-4, look and be an outside linebacker that you can walk up and he can rush the passer, because he's raw. There's no doubt about it. He's raw, but his length and his athleticism, and especially when he saw him at camp go up against some old tackles that we really liked, and we found like, wow, this kid's got some natural ability that hasn't been coached because he's been playing linebacker. We want to get you some pass rush snaps, and after like 2 of them, we're like, okay, we can pull the trigger on this guy and get this going.
You mentioned Darian Whitaker at camp, which he blew me away at that camp. One of probably the best camp performances I can remember from a linebacker, but like you said, kind of more of a hybrid. But I wanted to kind of beyond that open the door to, historically, since Coach Kleiman has been around, K-State has really prioritized camps. And so much of the commitment class has come from guys that have impressed at camp. Guy we love here on this show from way back when, Jacob Parrish, was a camp standout. Kind of pitch the process that K-State goes through in terms of getting guys to camps and maybe emphasize even more than I can the importance that K-State under Chris Kleiman and your staff has taken on camps?
Yeah, I would say the camps, it's really a great opportunity because it's padded. That's a big one, sure. But the way we've set it up now to see specific movement skills, the stations that we do to watch guys move, flexibility, those type of things. I think it helps us to target guys better. Hopefully allows us to not miss on guys because we've seen them do a lot of different things. The guys get a ton of reps. And you really get to see guys compete. And that's one of the biggest things that what you want to see is how is this guy going to compete? I can remember it would have been my second year running the camp and running the station, and guys were just kind of going through the motions. And I finally got upset and like, guys, you got 3 of our staff sitting here watching you specifically. You've got 3 FCS schools watching this group specifically, and you got 7 D2 coaches. What are you doing? Like, you better get your butts moving, or you ain't going. You came here to get an offer. You're not impressing anybody right now, and that's the thing we want to see. I hate to say it, you want to see is a guy going to fall out of the drill and say, yeah, I'm done. But it just gives us a chance to watch guys compete, see how they are when they're getting coached, because they're going to get coached. See how they handle some coaching. Can they listen? They follow to the directions as you're doing all the different drills and things like that. And it's a huge process for us. We want to get as many of those guys to camp. And the thing that as we go through the recruiting, everything keeps moving faster and faster and faster. It's really our camp focus has to be the 27 and the 28 class, and now this summer of getting those guys to camp so we can get them offered early. And hopefully we're not going in the camp looking for 8 guys in the 2026 class because we've lost a board.
Right.
That's the thing you don't want to ever do.
I love you bringing up the competitiveness of the camp setting. I went to O-line, D-line with you guys this year, and Ryan and I, we go to different camps, different combines, different things like that. Obviously, you've got a background kind of being all over the place. It feels like K-State's intensity level at camp is unique, even when compared to other camps. Is that something that you've sensed as well, that you guys put guys sort of in this cauldron where they can really be evaluated as competitors?
I would say so. I mean, that's kind of the purpose of, like, I'll be honest with you, it's the movement skills and stuff like that we do, like in the beginning of camp, not just the testing. I'm talking some of the different movement drills we do before we get into our individual work.
Sure.
Some of it's designed to say, okay, one, how's this kid change direction? What's he look like? There's going to be rest station, but we're doubling that up to see hip mobility, ankle mobility, things like that. But it's to see guys compete. Are you going to...
Sure.
You're going to bow out in station 4 and say, I'm gassed. I'm not going to go anymore. And, that to me, that tells you something about a young man. If he's going to say, yeah, I've had enough of this, I'm just going to bow out of this drill and then get to that next rest station and get some water. Then I'll go compete at the next one, and so that's stuff that we want to see. And then I would say the one-on-one stuff and even some of the indie drills, they're pretty competitive. And that's by design. We want guys that are going to be competitive in our locker room and on the field, and we want to make sure we're getting the right kids when they come in there.
Coach Kleiman initially brought you on in more of that quality control role, but I'm curious, like, at what point did you guys sit down and feel that there was a need to prioritize kind of the role that you're in now? I mean, was that something that was kind of a welcome challenge to you, or did it take some time to settle into?
Both. I can specifically remember the day we talked about it was he and I and Coach True were driving down to Avery's grandmother's funeral a year ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I just brought it up and said, Coach, I just want to know what you're looking for in this. And he kind of paused, looked at me, are you interested in this or something? And I'm like, well, I just feel like I can do more than just impact the program than just breaking down film and sitting in the offensive staff room and explaining defense and how it works. And so that kind of just started the conversations, and it just kind of kept going and going and going. And then got the job, which I was very grateful for. And from that point on, it was kind of a learning experience, to be honest with you, and trying to figure it out as you went, especially with the NIL and all those different things.
You've got the background at Abilene Christian, South Dakota State. Coach Kleiman has the background in North Dakota State. Is there an advantage to coming from the FCS level in terms of maybe seeing things a little bit differently, or how has that impacted you at all?
Yeah, I think so. And that's kind of something in our conversations, with how Coach and I talked about it, was like, how do you deal with, NIL? And I'd look at it as no different than this is what we have in the budget for this position. And you and I have both been in that before, where, when he was at North Dakota State, I was at South Dakota State, and we might have the same kid on campus, and he maybe goes to Northern Iowa, and, South Dakota State said, we're giving you a 65% scholarship, and North Dakota State's matched it. And then all of a sudden Northern Iowa offers 75.
Yep.
And you're trying to decide, do we want to make that bump, or do you want to sit pat and say, hey, you said maybe this about Northern Iowa, if that's where you want to go, then it's up to you. It's a 10% difference in the scholarship. And so that's kind of how I've approached it. I think that is an advantage of just knowing. That's how for me, I'm Coach and I never really talked about it, but on the defensive side of the ball, at SDSU, even at Abilene Christian, was where do you want, where are the full scholarships going to go?
Yeah.
What position on defense, and how much do you have left? Then, hey, we need a linebacker, but we've got 65% for that position of a scholarship. And okay, so we need to find a guy that's willing to take that. But, if he's got academics, that's going to up his scholarship, those type of things. And so I think that's kind of helped me in that regard. Plus also maybe looking at it and going, hey, this kid may not be, a high scholarship kid right now, but there's something I see in this kid, and our staff sees in this kid, that he's going to be at some point, which I think plays into the NIL piece of that as well.
Coach, I caveat this kind of knowing that this whole 105 roster limit thing is about to go into effect, and everything that comes with that from a scholarship standpoint of how K-State and other programs want to handle it. But I'm curious, kind of knowing the importance that the transfer market has on college football now, how has the scholarship process in terms of offering a kid from K-State, how has that kind of evolved and changed maybe how you guys have approached offering scholarship players at the high school level?
Yeah, I don't think for us, with the transfer portal, we're not going to change who we are as far as identity of being a developmental program, meaning we are going to bring high school kids in here, and we're going to develop them and then fill some holes that we know we have to fill with the portal. I think the biggest thing that we've tried to adjust to is we need to operate probably faster, as opposed to, I think a couple of years ago we could get away with, hey, we really like this kid, he needs to come to camp to get the offer. And that works for some kids, especially probably some local kids. But when you're looking at a kid from, say, Nebraska or Missouri or Iowa or, Oklahoma, and he's got 5 or 6 offers, he's not going to come to your camp why would he come to camp to get an offer from you if he's already got other ones? And that is the part that I would say we're still working on, trying to find that sweet spot. We've made some offers in the past, and we still will. We're offering contingent on you coming to camp and showing out. So if you choose not to come to our camp, that offer's, not going to be there, And so, we're not going to change our philosophy on the high school kids. That was something Coach really hammered with us last year, where he felt like we took too many transfer portal guys and not enough high school guys. And then I think you saw that number flip big time, where we had the 25 high school signees and then signed 14 in the transfer portal. But 2 of those guys, I would have said we probably weren't planning on signing until we had some injuries at some positions that guys we didn't think were going to be ready. And it's like, well, we got to grab a kid here. We got to grab a kid here and to shore up that position because those guys won't be ready for the start of the season.
You talked about, kind of triggering more quickly. One of the things that Bill Snyder even used to do was hold back a couple scholarships for guys who had big senior years, who flashed late. You guys had a scholarship available. Larry Porter winds up having this huge senior year, and you guys are able to hop in. So how do you weigh maybe keeping a couple scholarships potentially available, or was that just something that worked out the right way with Larry?
I think it's a combination of both. I do think you need to hold some, one or two back and not get into a panic. I think that, which is hard. It really is. Everybody wants to be wrapped up with their recruiting class by the end of June. And there's always going to be kids that have a great summer, a great winter and a summer, and they develop more. And then I think I think those are the kids that get overlooked a lot. And so we're trying to always make sure we're going back and looking at guys that we liked, not enough to offer, and then reevaluating them after 4 or 5 games their senior year. And so I think you have to have a little bit of a balance. If you can get most of the guys that you want to commit in June and can hang on to them, and then you're going to have a couple spots, I think, naturally every year to say, hey, all right, we've got a spot. We've got to find a guy. And like for Larry having a great senior year worked out for us.
Final one from me, Coach, and this is a big one. I'm opening a can of worms here. I know that, but I think with your coaching background, you're a great guy to ask this question to. Also, with your new role and how involved you are just in everything that goes into the program, we've kind of heard Coach Kleiman's opinion on this, but I'm curious again from your vantage point now. How would you fix the current recruiting calendar? Is there a way to easily fix the recruiting calendar?
Yeah, that's a great question. I do think that some of it has to be tailored to how the national championship game. I think the entire calendar has to be switched up. Whether it's everybody plays a week 0 game, which means now you're going to start the playoff earlier.
Yep.
Because even if you look at the guys that are going to the combine, say from Ohio State and Notre Dame, they got no time to prep. They're going to have to let their bodies recover and all that. So I just think it's an entire calendar switch, which will affect the recruiting. I do think one of the best decisions they made was not having coaches on the road in December.
Mm-hmm.
You can't protect your roster. I know in my first 2 years here as an analyst, everybody's out, and it was really easy for a kid to walk into the compliance office and say, hey, I'm going to go in the transfer portal because nobody was around. And now everybody's there, and you're having meetings with guys and getting a feel for where they're at. I like the early signing date idea that we kind of threw out in June. I do think it protects the high school kids. I do. If they wanted to sign for July 1st and having an early signing date there, they now have their spot on the team. As opposed to, hey, I'm committed, I'm going to sign in December, and then, we had an injury, we got to dump this kid and get a transfer portal kid. We can't take place. Good.
Mm-hmm.
Which whether that's an excuse, but it happens to a lot of guys. And so I think that'd be one way to improve. I think one thing that needs to happen, to be honest with you, is there needs to be a salary cap put in place for incoming freshmen.
Love it.
To get it back to what it used to be. I'm picking Kansas State, or I'm picking KU, or I'm picking Mizzou because of the fit in the scheme, the coaches, all that, not based on, I just got this amount of money I'm going to the highest bidder.
Right.
And if they could also say, hey, we're going to put a cap on you're going to stay at a school you sign with for at least 2 years before you can enter the transfer portal. I think those two things would help everybody, across the country. And I think you see less people in the portal, because right now it's just free reign that I'm not playing as a freshman, I'm going to leave. Or, maybe it's year 2, I haven't played, and guys aren't used to paying their dues, and They just want that instant success. And I get it. I mean, that's part of it, but I think a salary cap would be huge, for us. And I'm saying us as all NCAA schools to say, no, this is the max you can get as a true freshman. That's it. And you're going to now invest the rest of that salary cap into your main roster to keep those guys from going in the transfer portal,
Mm-hmm.
Last one for me. A lot of times when you guys get a commitment, it makes sense for lack of a better way to put it. Like, it's like, this is a Kansas State guy, whether it's Brock Heath, whether it's RJ Collins. When Gus Hawkins picked you guys, it was kind of like, hey, this is a K-State guy. What do you think is the similarity? What is basically leaving out positional, whatever? Like, what's a K-State recruit? What is a K-State guy according to you that you're going out there and looking for?
Well, obviously the easy one is, talent and have to have some talent, but I think it's the guys that fit our core values. Be selfless, tough, committed, and disciplined. And those are the things that we're trying to find out before they get on campus. We have a series of questions that we're trying to ask in the recruiting process to get to know the kids better, but also, is this kid, does he fit those 4 core values for us? That's something that we implemented, this winter with the transfer portal guys that we brought on campus, of having them do some things when they met with me, as far as, it wasn't just going over a contract. It was, all right, you're going to take this test. I'm not going to tell you specifically what it is. I want to give our secrets, right? And then also some things that geared towards figuring out, where is this kid's core values compared to where we're at? And having Coach Katz are with us, who was in the NFL for 15 years. And he was a guy that was sent in to do a lot of the interviews on guys at the combine, to try to get a better feel for those guys' character. And having those conversations really, I think, narrowed our focus down to saying, okay, this kid fits because of, where he scored on this. He hits our core values. Katz has some other questions that he asks them. And so that's the thing I would say. The biggest thing is we're looking for those guys that exhibit the 4 core values that we have. And because we know those guys maybe they're going to be a year or 2 away. Maybe it's 3 years away. But they're going to fit the program and be great in the locker room.